let's get to the latest on the Prime Minister's state visit in the United States. And now the, real important part of that visit has begun. It's the day 2 of the state visit, and the Prime Minister was welcomed at the White House with a 19-gun salute. There was also the playing of the national anthem of both countries. And welcoming the Prime Minister, President Joe Biden said, "We spent a lot of time together since the time I was Vice President, and since I became President, we established a relationship based on trust. Given the situation of the world, it's essential that India and US work together." So that was the opening remarks of President Joe Biden. Remember, yesterday as well, the President did meet Prime Minister Modi. He was welcomed at the White House by the First Lady and the President, and there was a private dinner then. But today is when the real working part of the trip begins, and the bilateral between the Prime Minister and President Joe Biden has begun. After that, the Prime Minister, they will be addressing the media, and there will also be a press conference. 2 questions, we believe, will be asked, one by an Indian reporter, one by an American reporter. Then the Prime Minister will be addressing a joint sitting of the Congress, and that's a rare honor, and this is the second time he will be doing so. And after that, we'll have a grand state dinner in the White House. So that is what the plan is for today. In fact, very interestingly, NDTV's Maha, who is there in the US, has also told us that perhaps on the 3rd day of the Prime Minister's visit in Washington, that perhaps there may even be another meeting between the President and the Prime Minister. Now, already, remember, there have been several big announcements. Mega deals are on the cards, and we've been reporting that all day and bringing you all the highlights. Big ticket announcements, which are range from a defense cooperation to space expedition. That's very interesting. A signing of an agreement between ISRO and NASA, and possibly an Indian astronaut to be sent to the International Space Station. So that's something to look forward to. And several deals to really strengthen the ties between the 2 countries. As we said, after the bilateral talks, which will now be taking place, these visuals of the hug earlier on as the Prime Minister was received at the White House. And the Prime Minister, as we said, will address a joint sitting of the 2 houses of the US Congress, and then the dinner. So let's talk about some of the deals that have taken place, the announcements that have been made. General Electric's aerospace arm has announced that it has teamed up with the state-owned Hindustan Aeronautics Limited to make fighter jet engines for the Indian Air Force in India. So that is a very key aspect of India's Make in India push that we've had. Also, Micron Technology, a prominent American chip maker, has been invited by the Prime Minister to set up an assembly plant in Gujarat. So that is also something that is very, very key. And remember, the chips are used in all aspects of our everyday life. So to have a plant set up in India is a vacuum that we realized, especially during the COVID times when there was a shortage. So this has been something that has gotten a great push. So Micron Technology to set up a base in India, an assembly plant in Gujarat. Also very welcome for the NRIs, for Indians who are working there in the United States, India and the US. Again, we've heard from sources, is all set to announce changes in the visa processing for H-1B visas, and also opening up of new consulates. So that's a big step up in diplomatic ties. And finally, Bengaluru will get its own US consulate. Imagine India's Silicon City, it had no US consulate till now. So that's on the cards. Also in Ahmedabad is what we're hearing. And India will set up a consulate in Seattle. So that will help in terms of Alaska as well, as a lot of interests are there. So those are some of the key announcements that are expected, as we said. And there you can see the inside pictures as the Prime Minister and President Joe Biden are sitting together ahead of the bilateral talks. All right, so Prime Minister Modi and Joe Biden, they're sitting. We're seeing if we can get any audio there, but that is the meeting that's taking place inside the White House, so the bilateral taking place.
White House में दोनों देशों के राष्ट्राध्यक्ष, इस वक्त आप देख सकते हैं दृश्य हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं कि राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेन और प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जिनके बीच इस वक्त वार्ता जारी है। और जैसा प्रधानमंत्री ने भी कहा कि विभिन्न आपसी, द्विपक्षीय, क्षेत्रीय और वैश्विक मुद्दों पर दोनों नेता आपस में बातचीत करेंगे, चर्चा करेंगे और उसके बाद क्या कुछ निकलकर सामने आ रहा है वो एक संयुक्त साझा बयान में हमारे सामने होगा।
व्हाइट हाउस के
Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden, and that's the very key sort of walking on the side there, and with the pillars of the White House on the side. That's a very characteristic visual or picture from the White House. And now to have the Prime Minister and President Joe Biden walking there is an interesting photo op. And not that he hasn't visited before, but earlier on the Prime Minister also spoke about how the White House has opened its gates for so many.
We're seeing our major defense partnership now pillar in the Pacific security. We're seeing our growing cooperation with a whole range of issues. We're seeing our economic ties and technology, inclusive economic growth for our people. We're seeing our growing cooperation host a whole range of 20 this year. Space, focusing more on technologies, clean energy, global infrastructure.
और इससे हम देखते हैं मैं आपका बहुत आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ कि आपने G20 में इस वर्ष आपने नेतृत्व किया है और साफ अभियान और साफ तौर पर दिया है जो कि हम सबके लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है।
I look forward to discussing how we can strengthen our partnership 20 this year, build a future together for the challenges that build our people. One grounded on democracy.
और प्रधानमंत्री मैं आपका बहुत आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ कि आपने G20 में इस वर्ष आज मैं आपका चर्चा किया है और अभियान इस तरह से आपको हित किया है इस तरह की जो सहभागिता को और मजबूत कर सकते हैं और एक साथ मिलकर एक ऐसा भविष्य तैयार करें जो हमारे लोगों के लिए और अधिक बेहतर है। एक ऐसा भविष्य जो लोकतंत्र, मानव अधिकारों, स्वतंत्रता और नियमों पर आधारित।
Welcome again, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a big agenda.
आज मैं आपके साथ चर्चा करने को देख रहा हूँ किस तरह से हम आपकी और अपनी सहभागिता को और एक बार फिर से और एक साथ मिलकर एक ऐसा भविष्य तैयार करें जो हमारे लोगों के लिए और अधिक बेहतर हो। एक ऐसा भविष्य जो लोकतंत्र, मानव अधिकारों, स्वतंत्रता और नियमों पर आधारित हो।
So welcome again, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a big agenda to continue to build our progress. Again, step by step, continue to build.
तो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी एक बार फिर से आपका
coming in.
Okay. Well, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for being here. Welcome back to the White House.
प्रधानमंत्री जी आपका यहाँ पर स्वागत है फिर से आपने हमें आपको दिया धन्यवाद।
Almost exactly.
That is inside the White House as President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi, begin their bilateral talks. And this is a photo op really for the media there. But to talk more about the Prime Minister's visit and the significance of this visit, we're now joined by Dr. Tara Kartha, a former Director, National Security Council Secretariat, and Daniel Markey, a Senior Advisor, South Asia, USIP, and Senior Fellow at FBI SAIS. Thank you so much both for joining us. And Dr. Tara Kartha, first to you, a very, very significant visit which also shows India's importance to the US, given, the manner of this visit, the red carpet that's been rolled out, the manner in which the Prime Minister has been welcomed, and all the sort of statements coming out of the White House ahead of this visit.
Yes, I know. It's actually personally also quite a huge victory for all of us, because all of this was being put together at the NSCS, as you know. The whole ICT was being put together from there. So I'm so happy to see that. I mean, this is tremendous, right? I have never in all my years in government service seen a visit as heavily uploaded as this one. This has got so many deliverables across the board. In, like you said just now, in space, in terms of the engine technology, in terms basically of the enormous goodwill, at least from India. There is huge goodwill, which, let me tell you, was not the case earlier. At least 10 years ago, there was so much suspicion of the United States, which is not there now. I mean, every person wants to send his child across. Second thing is, you should remember this is a kind of uploading since 95, 2015, the defense framework. Everything was going so slowly, both sides were trying to work things out, and suddenly we have this huge upsurge. So I think it's a huge initiative by the President Biden, I think, who has thrust this forward. It's something which really the most significant partnership which we are seeing for us in a decade. This is a huge thing. So it's
right. Dr. Karta, sorry to interrupt you there. We're just going to play out another clip of the interaction inside. Let's just listen in.
विश्व के सबसे बड़े देश भारत और अमेरिका
एक ऐसा भविष्य जो लोग
मेरा मानना हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक सजदा मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए वैश्विक शांति और स्थिरता के लिए लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में विश्वास रखने वाली सभी ताकतों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है और पहले से कहीं ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण है। ये विश्वास है कि हम मिलकर पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में अवश्य सफल होंगे।
Thank you for being here. Welcome back to the White House.
सभी की नजर
10 years ago, when I visited Mumbai as Vice President,
भारत और अमेरिका
I emphasized how important it was
मेरा मानना
in the United States
कि हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक
to build a
सजदा
partnership
मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए
steps at a time.
वैश्विक शांति और स्थिरता के लिए लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में विश्वास रखने वाली सभी ताकतों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है
Over that
और
past 10
पहले
years,
से
those
कहीं
small
ज्यादा
steps have
महत्वपूर्ण
transformed
मुझे विश्वास है कि हम मिलकर पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में अवश्य
today. The partnership between our countries is stronger.
सभी
All right, the Prime Minister, what you could make out from that statement talking about how, working together, the US and India in the future and how significant that would be and, the close ties between the two countries. Well, let's go back to our guest, Daniel Markey. We were talking about how the US has rolled out the red carpet and, the importance, being given to Prime Minister Modi at this state visit. He'll be addressing a joint sitting of the Congress. But it's also significant to talk about, the third person in this relationship, which is China. And never before has India been, more important for the United States, given its fraught relationship with China and with Russia.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's China that has in many ways brought the United States and India closer together even than they were before. I mean, there's a continuity story here. The U.S.-India relationship has steadily improved over the past 2 decades. This isn't simply a Joe Biden, Narendra Modi story, but there's also a change story, and that change has happened over the past several years. I think the acceleration of Indian concerns about China as a security threat along India's border has made the Modi government much more interested in exploring more serious, especially in the defense realm, serious stepwise advances with the United States. And the United States, because its relationship with China has also deteriorated, I think increasingly sees India really through that lens. It's also interesting to note that Secretary of State Tony Blinken was just in Beijing this past week. And there, even as he was attempting, I think, to try to normalize the relationship a bit, halt a downward slide, there was still some challenges. And I think those cannot be soft-sold. I think those will continue. And I think now, with this week ending on this high note of a visit from by Narendra Modi to Washington, will highlight the differences in the way that the United States characterizes its relationship with China as compared to how it characterizes its relationship with India.
Right, and these key deals, in defense, tech, space, this is also a means of weaning India away on it dependence on Russia as well. So that is also something that is, that's the pragmatic approach in this entire, all this talk about this grand welcome, etc., and all these mega deals. But that's really the reason for some of these mega deals.
Yeah, that's certainly the ambition. India continues to buy a great deal of high-end military equipment from Russia, or is trying to. That can't be changed overnight. I think everybody in the United States is pretty realistic about how challenging it will be and how that's a kind of a longer-term project. But the defense deals that are being signaled so far, the drone deal certainly, but even maybe in some ways more importantly, the jet engine deal, those are significant steps to replace, especially the jet engine deal, to replace Russian-built equipment in the Indian arsenal. And as I say, it'll take some time, but the willingness on the U.S. side is a reflection of a sense of this kind of once-in-a-generation opportunity to really change where India is buying its arms from. And that, again, relates back directly to the shared China threat.
Right. Dr. Tara Kartha, your comments on this, the China role in this entire, close relationship developing between India and the US, though it's something that has taken several years to develop, but now more than ever. We do know that when the Prime Minister addresses the joint sitting of the Congress, that there are some members who are boycotting it because they feel, they're trying to highlight the issues of human rights in India and authoritarian move in India. So that aspect is something that some of the Democrats have also raised. But right now, Joe Biden, the presidency, their focus is on cultivating a close relationship with India.
On the China thing, yes, of course, it's important for us. I mean, to have a credible defense against China is vital. But, I would ground this visit more, in terms of the fact that we are now one of the fastest growing economies. We have a stable political, establishment. I mean, I don't see Narendra Modi going anywhere for the next 5 years at least. So there is a lot. We're looking at investment. We're looking at, easing unemployment in this country. And it is vital for both countries to sustain the economic growth. This is critical. I mean, if you look at the Jake Sullivan speech, which I think was brilliant, that is what he's emphasizing, that it has to bring the middle class in both countries. They have to get benefits. Our youth has to be employed. So the focus is that. I mean, just look at the content. The defense deals are fantastic. But you're also seeing that the shift here is the bringing in of private industry. The shift is bringing in of startups. We have got one of the largest startup areas in the country. We've got such amazing, and you should know that some of these startups have been, at least over the last 2 years, have been assisting US defense companies. So there's a lot of technology flow. And remember, this is where we are strong in terms of IT, in terms of, getting this startup base together and delivering on our economy. That is a very, very key focus. But China, yes, China, of course. And I'm assuming Beijing must be extremely unhappy to watch these scenes, on your screen. But that is not the primary focus. That's all I'm trying to say. There is a lot more than this. If you look, you saw the President Biden was even referring to the Quad. Many of, not all, but some of these initiatives are also replicated with Quad countries. So this is actually much larger. It's a huge endeavor. And I really have great hopes of this going forward in the coming years.
Right, absolutely. And, also what is very welcome when we know the talks are on and they were expecting an announcement on the H-1B visas and the opening up of new consulates. So that will be a huge thing for India, especially, given that we have so many of our NRIs working in the United States, and very welcome that they don't have to fly back to India and then have to renew their visas, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah. These are the things which get people excited, right? I mean, it matters to them in a day-to-day sphere to get more jobs. I mean, this initiative I said, for example, is going to bring universities together. It's going to bring talent together. It's technology driven. And in terms of, in terms of aircraft manufacture, you should remember the Tatas are already into this in a big way. So we are coming up there in terms of getting our, we missed out on the whole industrial revolution, right? So we've got a lot of making up to do. So this is where it's dead, and this is where we really, really need the US to be with us at this critical time. This is a moment of takeoff.
Right.
And so I'll stop there.
Right, and the US also, needs India in all these, big, if global pushes, if, even if it's technology, if it's climate change as well. A final word, Daniel Markey, what are you looking out for in this visit?
Well, I agree with all the points that were just made. As the United States contemplates a future of competition with China that's likely to stretch on into decades, India is the only country on earth that offers a scale that can match China, and now in terms of population is actually larger than China's. And that's something that Americans appreciate. They also know very well, and the point about visas was made earlier, that India is very rich in lots of important ways, including human talent. And in terms of building up the future economy and a technologically oriented economy, India is likely to be central to that. So in all those ways, there's a closeness and an importance attached to India here in the United States. You had asked earlier about questions of democracy and human rights and how that may play. And that's an important subtext here. And of course, all the news media here is focused on this question to some extent of how the Biden administration is balancing its rhetoric with respect to this visit between, on the one hand, a close and eager determination to improve a relationship with India as a partner, as a strategic partner, for reasons of interest and for all of these reasons of economic opportunity and so on. But on the other hand, an appreciation that there are dissenting voices and concerns about the trajectory of India's democracy in terms of human rights, freedom of the press, and so on. And so there's a close eye on how Biden is managing that balance. You saw that he's already been very clear about how democracy and these types of values are central to the reason why India is so attractive as a partner to the United States. And so I think he'll be continuing in his private conversations with Prime Minister Modi to express the centrality of these issues to the way that the American people and to the way that he and his administration see India and the importance that they attach to these issues. I don't think he wants it to be a critical or berating or lecturing approach to India. I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea in terms of a state visit. But I do think that highlighting...
Yes, I think that's something the White House already said, that they'll not be lecturing, but, it may come up. Well, thank you both for joining us on the program as we continue to cover the Prime Minister's visit to the United States, this state visit, and currently bilateral talks taking place between Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden. We'll